My name is Satoshi Kono, Executive Vice President of Raccoon Holdings, Inc. Thank you for gathering here today to attend the financial results presentation for the third quarter of the fiscal year ending April 2025. The summary of financial results was released earlier today at 15:30, so allow me to use this opportunity to give you an outline. Allow me to discuss a number of key points, starting with the progress rate against this fiscal year's plan. Year to date, as of the end of the third quarter, we continue making very good progress toward the targets we set for ourselves for fiscal year 2025. Specifically, the progress rate against the full fiscal year net sales target stood at 74.7% and at 76.2% against the operating income target. Two key themes in fiscal year 2025 are achieving a V-shaped recovery in operating income and the highest profit ever in company history. 3 quarters into fiscal year 2025, we are proud to say that we have made very good progress toward achieving these targets. Key point number 2 covers the revision of the results forecasts and a dividend increase. Earlier today, together with the financial results for the period under review, Raccoon also announced its revised results forecast and revised dividend guidance for fiscal year 2025. Looking at the revised forecasts, you'll notice that the net sales and operating income targets remain the same. What did change is the fact that we booked a gain on investments in investment partnerships within non-operating income. This gain was booked in the third quarter, and we raised ordinary and net income guidance in order to reflect this reality. Additionally, while we were initially guiding for an interim and year-end dividend payment of 10 yen per share each, we now expect to be able to distribute 12 yen per share as a year-end dividend. In other words, we are now guiding for an annual dividend of 22 yen per share. As you can see here on page 4, Raccoon's dividend policy calls for a consolidated dividend payout ratio of between approximately 45 and 50%. As such, since we booked a gain on investments in investment partnerships within non-operating income, and as per company policy, we have reflected part of this gain in the dividend forecast. Now allow me to explain just what exactly this gain on investments in investment partnerships is. These are distributions from a VC fund. More specifically, about 10 years ago, Raccoon invested 100 million yen in this fund. This fund has now delivered a successful exit and apportioned part of the profits to investors in the form of a distribution payment. We made this investment 10 years ago at a time when the word fintech was starting to enter the mainstream and was being lauded as an innovative and useful technology. Raccoon's paid and Uriho services fall into the fintech category and precede this investment. At the time, fintech was a very nascent industry related to our businesses of paid and Uriho, so we invested the aforementioned amount of 100 million yen in a VC fund specializing in the fintech industry, primarily for the purpose of gathering and accessing more information about this up-and-coming industry. This investment has now borne fruit. Furthermore, and as disclosed in a previous press release, in addition to this investment carried out a decade ago, we have also allocated a total of approximately 600 million yen to 6 VC fund investments over the past couple of years. The purpose here is the same as before, as we believe this investment will allow us to obtain valuable information about different industries. Another aim behind this investment is identifying promising startups and getting our foot in the door by getting them to adopt paid, starting with the early stages of business development, while these companies are still relatively small. Once these companies grow in size, this translates into large transaction volumes. In other words, another objective behind these investments is obtaining potentially lucrative sales leads. Key point number 3 is that there are signs that average sales per buying customer for our super delivery website in the EC business has bottomed out. This is something very important and thus something we want to highlight. Beginning in the latter half of the second quarter of the April 2024 fiscal year, we started offering a free-of-charge plan to domestic users of the super delivery service. Whereas previously, we would charge a membership fee of 2,000 yen, This free plan did away with this fee as a way to attract user memberships and grow the number of merchants. These efforts have borne fruit, with very strong growth in registrations and the number of merchants. In a moment, we will be showing you a graph that highlights this. Additionally, concurrent with this, we also started contending with a decrease in the value of transactions per customer. What happened is that we saw growing GMV as a result of a continuous influx of customers, but part of this GMV was offset by a corresponding decrease in the value of transactions per customer. This has been an issue in desperate need of a solution over the past year. As you can see from the table, average sales per buying customer had seen a double-digit YOY contraction every quarter since the introduction of the new free plan in the second quarter of fiscal year 2024, and through the first quarter of the ongoing fiscal year. However, this rate has now at last fallen into the single-digit range in the second quarter of fiscal year 2025, which saw a YOY contraction of 7%, and third quarter results were more or less unchanged from the same period in fiscal year 2024, dropping by only 0.9% on a YOY basis. While we do expect some degree of volatility to persist, we believe that an increase in the number of buying customers will more likely translate into direct GMV growth going forward. External factors in the Japanese market were partially the reason for this slowdown in falling average sales per buying customer in the third quarter. Specifically, as I believe you experienced firsthand, summer-like temperatures dragged on for much longer in 2024 than in previous years. This was then followed by an abrupt transition to sudden cold temperatures in the third quarter, making it easier to move winter inventory, and this helped slow down falling average sales per buying customer. Consequently, average sales per buying customer for retailers turned positive, growing 2.7% on a YOY basis, but decreased slightly for categories other than retailers, culminating in an overall decrease of 0.9%, including overseas operations. To reiterate, domestic retailers hold a high GMV composition ratio, and the fact that this category saw higher average sales per buying customer was a very significant factor. What's more, the international segment also boasted a YOY increase in both the number of buying customers and average sales per buying customer. That said, the third quarter usually isn't a very strong quarter, as it is characterized by volatility around the previous fiscal year's baseline. Some years it closes above this threshold, and in some other years below. An important factor here is the Chinese New Year, which is a moving holiday, and what happens in the days leading up to the start of this holiday season is that orders from customers in Greater China, places like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and parts of South Korea, come to a near complete halt. The same holds true for order shipments. In 2025, the Chinese New Year took place between January 28th and February 4th, that is, in the third quarter and going into the fourth quarter. Circling back to what I said earlier, both orders and shipments dried up almost completely in the days leading up to the 28th. So, over the short term, we faced very significant headwinds in the third quarter. In 2024, the Chinese New Year took place between the 10th and 17th of February, which falls squarely in the fourth quarter. In other words, there was no disruption in terms of orders and shipments in the third quarter last year, so, given this disparity, it wouldn't be all that surprising if we had seen a YOY decrease in terms of the number of buying customers and average sales per buying customer. Despite this, orders came in very strong in the third quarter, as the number of buying customers and average sales per buying customer increased by 5.5% and 3.8% on a YOY basis, respectively. Next is key point number 4. Here, segment profit margin for the financial business increased to 33.4%. One thing I would like to convey to stakeholders about the financial business is that we completed the sale of Raccoon Rent, which was our old rent guarantee business. This sale was completed on November 1st, 2024, which marks the first day of the third quarter. In other words, starting with the third quarter, sales and profits from the rent guarantee business no longer make a contribution to the company's consolidated results. Because of this, as you'll see on the graph in a moment, Net sales growth in the financial business was relatively low on account of the exclusion of the rent guarantee business. That said, as you can see on the vertical bar graph on the bottom left-hand corner, net sales growth, excluding the impact of the sale of the rent guarantee business, has been very strong. Additionally, segment profit margin, the green line on the graph on the upper right-hand corner, showed very strong growth, increasing to 33.4%. Segment profit margin increased dramatically during the COVID-19 pandemic, as government subsidies allowed businesses to post significant profit margin improvements. Segment profit margin has now reached this threshold last seen during COVID, and we view this development as a bullish sign and a sign of tremendous strength. I will be going over the details in a moment, but compared to the EC business, the financial business is less dependent on promotions in the form of things like advertising and other sales promotions. Sales in this business also tend to follow a more recurring-like structure, so we expect increases in profit margin to become more pronounced as we grow sales, since these are correlated. Key point number 5 pertains to the progress of share repurchases. Here are the numbers. As described here at the bottom, we are targeting up to 1.1 million shares to be repurchased, corresponding to up to 5.1% of the total number of issued shares. The total repurchase cost is capped at 1.1 billion yen, and the repurchase period is ongoing, taking place between October 22, 2024 and April 30th, 2025, which corresponds to the end date for fiscal year 2025. In other words, 2 months remain within the scope of this repurchase operation. As of February 28, 2025, we had repurchased a total of 629,900 shares for a progress rate against the upper bound target of 57.3%. In terms of the total repurchase costs, we have spent 470 million yen so far, corresponding to a progress rate of 43.3%. Approximately 470,000 shares remain, so we will continue this repurchase program over the remaining 2-month period while keeping a close eye on the company's stock price. This concludes my overview of the 5 key points. I would now like to go over the consolidated results for the third quarter of the fiscal year ending April 2025. Circling back to what I said earlier, within non-operating income, we recorded a gain on investments in investment partnerships. This gain was a significant change. Besides non-operating income, we recorded 4.559 billion yen in net sales, 3.7 billion yen in gross profit, and 952 million yen in operating income. This represents a YOY increase in operating income of 104.7%. Ordinary income came in at 1.117 billion yen, up 139.3% YOY, and net income stood at 659 million yen, up 112.3% YOY. The rightmost column contains the revised full-year result forecasts. Another relevant factor in fiscal year 2025 is the recording of extraordinary losses. Specifically, we recorded a loss on liquidation of business of 123 million yen in the second quarter, ahead of the sale of the rent guarantee business. This was followed by a loss on sale of 26 million yen in the third quarter, bringing the extraordinary loss total to around 150 million yen, slightly higher than expected, but still nevertheless broadly in line with expectations. We have also recently started disclosing a summary of consolidated results, excluding advertising and sales promotion expenses. Net sales aren't affected by these expenses, so naturally, this line item stays the same. We had recorded 995 million yen in advertising and sales promotion expenses in the year-to-date period through the end of the third quarter last year. For fiscal year 2025, this number had dropped to 732 million yen. I will be going over the reasons for this decrease in a moment, but looking at the numbers, this represents a YOY reduction of 26.5%. Consequently, operating income excluding advertising and sales promotion expenses went from 1.46 billion yen in the third quarter of last fiscal year to 1.684 billion yen in the third quarter of the ongoing fiscal year, a YOY increase of 15.3%. Next are the trends in group GMV and in the Uriho guarantee balance. The graph on the left shows transaction value within paid, GMV for the super delivery business, and transactions combining both services, that is, transactions made through paid within the super delivery platform, with the proper adjustments in order to avoid double counting. Overall group GMV came in at just under 18 billion yen in the third quarter, and, as evidenced by the graph, continues on a very strong upward trend. Next, the vertical bar graph on the right shows the trend in Uriho's guarantee balance, which grew significantly in the third quarter. Growth had experienced a slight temporary slowdown in the second quarter, but the upward trend once again resumed in the third quarter. The vertical bar graph shows the consolidated net sales results through to the third quarter, year to date, and over a number of past fiscal years. Naturally, sales continued growing over time and increased by 6.0% on a YOY basis. Sales increased by 7.1% in the EC business and by 4.6% in the financial business. Circling back to what I said earlier, the financial business used to include sales from the rent guarantee business. We completed the sale of the rent guarantee business, which, as of the third quarter, is no longer part of the scope of consolidation. Correcting for this change, the actual intrinsic growth rate for the financial business in the third quarter was actually double-digit growth for the period under review, 14.8% to be precise. Next are the quarterly trends. The removal of the rent guarantee business from the financial business translated into a QOQ decrease in net sales in the third quarter. That said, and to reiterate, this was primarily on account of the sale of the rent guarantee business. Next are the trends in gross profit. Gross profit follows the same trend, so I won't be spending too much time on this slide. In summary, even without the rent guarantee business, we registered a gross profit growth between the second and third quarters. Next are the trends in expenses, which underwent significant changes. Specifically, we registered a significant decrease in advertising expenses. If you'll remember, at the start of the ongoing fiscal year, we announced we wouldn't be implementing large-scale mass advertising efforts. This translated into lower advertising expenses, which, coupled with sales growth, meant we were expecting a V-shaped recovery, as communicated to stakeholders. Things turned out the way we had predicted. Whereas we had recorded 995 million yen in sales and promotion expenses through the end of the third quarter last fiscal year, this amount decreased by a significant amount to 732 million yen for the same period this fiscal year. To be precise, this represents a year-on-year decrease of 263 million yen. Last fiscal year, we spent a considerable amount on large-scale mass advertising efforts, and this allowed us to obtain valuable data, and overall, this was a meaningful effort in terms of forward-looking investment, also with an experimental element to it. That said, on a shorter time frame, and looking at the numbers, we didn't really see significant results. So, while we reduced large-scale mass advertising spend, this has had virtually no impact on customer acquisition numbers. In other words, we didn't scrimp on advertising expenses in order to raise profits or anything of the sort. Next are the trends in operating income. As I mentioned just now, the execution of large-scale mass advertising efforts in fiscal year 2024 led to a temporary decrease in operating income and margin. Operating margin has since then undergone a V-shaped recovery and is in the process of returning to previous levels. In terms of operating income, excluding advertising and sales promotion expenses, shown here on the right, we have delivered growth in excess of fiscal year 2024 results. Next are the trends in operating income by quarter. We spent considerable amounts on advertising and sales promotion expenses in fiscal year 2024, which led to a noticeable decrease in operating income and worsening in operating margin. While advertising expenses for the ongoing fiscal year still exceed fiscal year 2023 levels, we have cut back from fiscal year 2024 levels, and this has allowed us to grow operating income in the first, second, and third quarters. Operating income excluding advertising and sales promotion expenses, shown here on the right, continues growing at a very strong pace. Next is a summary by segment, starting with the EC business. The results for the EC business are as shown here. We divide this business into the segments of domestic and international. We are guiding for 13.7% YOY GMV growth in the domestic segment, but unfortunately, this business has fallen short of the target, showing instead a slightly more moderate growth of 9.6%. This was primarily the result of lower average sales per buying customer through the second quarter. Average sales per buying customer decreased more than we had anticipated, and this significantly weighed down on results. Average sales per buying customer have since then improved considerably in the third quarter, but we remain behind schedule to some extent. Regarding the international segment, we are guiding for 14.4% YOY GMV growth, with realized third quarter cumulative results coming in as a 13.7% increase against the same period last fiscal year. While this technically represents a slight underperformance, we view results as being more or less in line with expectations. We are in the process of executing a variety of measures across the two business segments. In the domestic segment, we are currently focused on customer acquisitions. While we have reduced our large-scale mass advertising efforts, we continue allocating advertising spend to traditional mediums like listing ads, at levels similar to the amounts deployed in fiscal year 2023. We have also extended the payment due date for paid users in an effort to increase average sales per buying customer, among other initiatives. In the international segment, we are executing measures to strengthen advertising and PR tailored to specific areas and countries, selecting the types of advertising that are most efficient for each case. We also enacted measures to strengthen cooperation with forwarding companies. Things have been going very well, especially starting in the third quarter. Here is a more detailed overview of domestic EC. As of the end of the third quarter, the number of domestic customers stood at 31,162 stores, growing by 12.1% on a YOY basis. Domestic average sales stood at 167,561 yen and was down slightly, 1.8%, on a YOY basis. Looking at the breakdown, average sales per buying customer grew by 2.7% YOY for retailers and decreased by 0.2% for the category of other than retailers. This underscores strong growth from the category of retailers. The number of buying customers for the category of retailers increased by 4% on a YOY basis, and by 23.5% for the category of other than retailers. While this is a considerable difference, the growth rate of 4% in the category of retailers is the result of a clear-cut reason. The graph on page 27 shows the trends in first-time purchasers and repeat purchasers. If we look at the graph, you can see a marked increase in repeat purchasers in the third quarter of fiscal year 2024. As you may remember, we changed our price structure last year, and this change was followed by what we termed our Welcome Back campaign. This was a rather ambitious campaign with a 100 million yen plus budget. Previously, we would charge a 2,000 yen membership fee. Many users did not like the previous system, which led to a rather large number of dormant accounts. As part of this campaign, we offered a generous balance of 20,000 points in order to incentivize activity from this customer group. Our efforts bore fruit as we saw a surge in repeat purchasers. That said, we slightly overshot our mark, with many members returning to our platform simply to take advantage of the point rewards. The number of repeat purchasers then went down in the fourth quarter, as a subset of returning purchasers had by then exhausted their points balance. In other words, this increase in the third quarter was rather irregular, making for a rather irregular YOY comparison this fiscal year. In summary, this YOY growth rate of 4% in the category of retailers is an artifact of the Welcome Back campaign we held last year. The category of other than retailers never required the aforementioned 2,000 yen membership fee, so while we did see repeat customers as a result of promotions, this trend took place primarily in the category of retailers. As such, the category of retailers faced more challenging YOY comparisons in the third quarter, hence the weaker growth. We expect the growth rate to pick up once again in the fourth quarter and beyond. Next is international EC. Here, the trends remain more or less constant. Circling back to what I said earlier, the dates for the Chinese New Year represented a headwind for third quarter results. That said, despite being directly impacted by the timing of the Chinese New Year, Taiwan nevertheless recorded YoY GMV growth of 7.9%. Taiwan had been experiencing headwinds for quite some time and consistently reporting negative growth, but over the past 2-3 quarters, growth has now turned positive and brought this market back into a growth trajectory. Results in Hong Kong remain sluggish. Additionally, while our presence in the US and South Korean markets has grown, leading to slightly lower growth rates, we were still able to maintain double-digit growth levels in these markets, for which we have great hopes. Trends in super delivery GMV growth are as shown here. Average sales per buying customer started to stabilize in the third quarter, allowing this business to deliver rather significant GMV growth. The number of buying customers and the value of transactions per customer are as shown here. While some of this can be attributed to seasonality, these two delivered positive growth from the second to the third quarter. Additionally, the number of buying customers went up by 1,479 retailers between the end of the second and third quarters. We saw an increase of 774 retailers between the first and second quarters, underscoring a significant increase in the number of purchasing agents from the increase between the first and second quarters. Technically, first-time purchasers are down slightly, but for all intents and purposes, the trend remains more or less flat. That said, repeat purchasers continue on a very strong upward trend. Looking at repeat purchasers in isolation, we saw a very strong increase of 1,606 retailers compared to a second quarter baseline. Next is the trend in the value of transactions per customer. Value of transactions per domestic retailer increased both on a YoY and QoQ basis, with the category of other than retailers posting a slight YoY decrease, accompanied by a slight QoQ increase. Lastly, the international segment delivered a YoY and QoQ increase. Sales follow the GMV trend, so allow me to skip this slide. Last in the EC business are the trends in segment profit. Circling back to what I said earlier, we scaled up our promotion efforts last fiscal year and are now in the process of achieving a V-shaped recovery. Allow me to draw your attention to a significant change that took place in the third quarter. Profit results for the first and second quarters of the ongoing fiscal year are slightly lower than profits during the same period in the fiscal year ended April 2023, the year preceding our foray into sales promotions. At last, we were able to beat fiscal year 2023 results starting in the third quarter, growing segment profit from 307 million yen to 327 million yen. Looking at first quarter results, segment profit decreased from 330 million yen to 298 million yen, and from 308 million yen to 288 million yen. A reversal of this trend took place in the third quarter, and we believe this to be a significant milestone. In summary, in the third quarter, the increase in marginal profit on account of higher sales has, at last, exceeded the higher costs associated with investment in advertising we carried out last year. We therefore place great importance on this development in the third quarter, as we consider it a very important change within the scope of forward-looking initiatives. Next is the summary for the financial business. All in all, the financial business has posted strong results. We are guiding for a 14.3% YoY increase in transaction volume for paid, with cumulative third quarter realized results coming in at 14.9%. This corresponds to an overperformance versus the target. We made good progress in growing the number of active member companies, while simultaneously increasing transaction volume per company. These efforts have ultimately allowed us to slightly exceed our target. Growth in Uriho's guarantee balance has lagged our guidance target. As I showed you earlier with the graph, we saw robust moves in the third quarter, but because of a slight underperformance in the first and second quarters, Uriho remains a little bit behind on a cumulative basis. Page 33 shows the trends in transaction value for paid. As you can see, we continue seeing strong results here. As shown here, while Uriho's guarantee balance had plateaued somewhat in the first and second quarters, results then picked up in the third quarter. Next are the trends in sales by quarter. The removal of the rent guarantee business in the third quarter makes sales results in the financial business look rather weak, but excluding the impact of the rent guarantee business, we have seen steady results. I would now like to discuss the trends in the rate of cost of sales, which corresponds to the rate of defaults in the financial business. The rate of cost of sales remained low in the third quarter. That is to say, there were few defaults, and this performance was accretive to results. Investors and other stakeholders have picked up on media reports about a relentless trend of corporate bankruptcies, and often inquire about the health of our portfolio. As it stands, Raccoon's credit screening methods have been working extremely well, allowing us to keep defaults in check, as is clearly shown here on the vertical bar graph. Last are the trends in segment profit for the financial business. We have posted very strong results in fiscal year 2025 after significant operating income decreases toward the end of the third quarter and in the fourth quarter of fiscal year 2024, on account of concentrated large-scale mass advertising spend toward Uriho. We then discontinued the use of mass advertising and also recorded higher sales, which led to a significant increase in segment profit. Operating income, excluding advertising and sales promotion expenses too, naturally delivered very strong growth. Segment profit margin too has delivered very strong growth and stands at 33.4%. The segment profit margin remains slightly on the lower side compared to the EC business. Specifically, EC boasts a margin of 35.8%, meaning there is a delta of about 2 percentage points compared to the margin of 33.4%. That said, gross profit margins are very similar, with the financial business having just slightly worse margins. Going forward, the EC and financial businesses have different profit structures, with the EC business having a slightly higher dependence on promotions. The financial business has a rather low degree of dependence on promotions, and furthermore, this business still brings in less net sales volume. The breakdown of net sales volume is 57% for the EC business and 43% for the financial business. Because sales volumes for this business are still small, as this business continues to grow going forward, and taking into account the fact that this business depends less on promotions, there is a chance the financial business might end up with the better profit margins of the two. Personally, I have great hopes for the financial business. We invite you to view the appendix at your convenience later on. This concludes today's financial results presentation. Thank you for your time.